There we go. All right. Okay, I will start again here. And first thing I want to report on again is June's report. Her cirrhosis of the liver that she got from all the drinking. Actually, I think I shared with you last week. She probably hasn't had a pint total in her entire life of alcoholic beverage. So, and a friend of mine said that he's the only person he knows who could smell a cork and go to sleep. All right. So anyway, we're happy about that. She got a good A-OK report for her on her liver. And then I got to spend some time today with Phil Lester, and who says he will join us on Zoom when he and Ellen get to a place where they can have dependable internet service. And but he's in town here, and we had a good time. And then the other thing I want to report is Bill Carpenter, our invisible partner here, is a new grandfather, and
Wow.
is I think it was a little girl, wasn't it, honey?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bill, you want to come on and tell us about her? Apparently doesn't.
Can't
But
find
anyway,
the
yeah. Anyway, yeah, new granddaughter, and he's like us. He has more grandkids than he can count because he has more kids than he can count. And so anyway, that's, oh, here's Rhonda. Admit, there we go. Okay. There we go. What, and then Bill left us, right? Looks like he dropped out.
He's probably gonna try to reconnect.
Yeah, maybe so. Okay. And hello, Rhonda.
Hey.
All right. Anyway, here's Bill trying to get back in.
If nobody watches for the doctrine, they can just watch for the laughs.
Yeah.
There you go.
This is
What?
always,
Watch for the idiot who's supposed to be in charge of all this. All right. Well, Bill and Rhonda are seem to be having trouble getting on the video if that's what they're wanting to do. But we're going to get started here. And so I already made the announcements. Does anybody else have any announcements? Well, the preacher just left. Oh, there he is.
Had to close the door.
Okay. All right. So we are, I think, on chapter 3 today of 2 Corinthians. And Carl, take it away.
Anybody want to read chapter 3, verse 1 through 4, or shall I do it? Anybody got it in front of them?
I got it in front of me, but Mike won't let me have any light, so I can't read it. It's
You
dark.
can turn that light back on, honey.
It's okay.
There's Rhonda. There she is.
Wow.
I'll read
And
it.
there's Bill. Hey,
Hey.
Full house.
there we go.
I'll read it.
All right. And
Okay, go for it. Just verses 1 through 4, or
Okay.
1 through 3.
1 through 3. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. Are we beginning to praise ourselves again? Are we like others who need to bring you letters of recommendation or who ask you to write such letters on their behalf? Surely not. The only letter of recommendation we need is you yourselves. Your lives are a letter written in our hearts. Everyone can read it and recognize our good work among you. Clearly, you are a letter from Christ, showing the result of our ministry among you. This letter is written not with pen and ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. It is carved not on tablets of stone, but on human hearts.
Wow, okay. That's interesting. Let me tell you, to get your thinking juices going, let me tell you a little conversation I had today, text conversation with a young man who was pastoring one of the churches I attend, and no longer, but we've stayed in touch. And he was commenting about the
Mike, it's not letting me get in on it. I had to come in a different way than what you normally do, which it says launch meeting. It won't let me come in there. I'm gonna get off of here because I can't hear anything.
Okay,
Okay.
try it
Well,
again if you want.
Yeah, try it again, Billy.
Yeah, we don't want to miss you.
No, we want you here. But we'll continue on. We'll continue
Yeah,
on
we'll
without
continue
you.
on, but keep trying. Of course, I can't tell him that because he's not listening. So,
That's right.
of course, Bill never listens anyway. So, oh, that's me. That's me. I forgot.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Yeah.
here we go.
I'll
Okay,
call
so
him.
anyway, we have this young pastor friend who was pastoring the church and left, and the church is now candidating to get new pastors. And so we had this discussion today about what is required. And I noticed all the candidates, the way candidating works and the way churches work, and I'm not knocking this, but it's just the way churches work. It's kind of like a job. And so it's a job interview and you get paid and you get a title and all that stuff. And I think it kind of has to work that way with large organizations or even small ones to be organized, because everybody gravitates toward it. But I find a little humor in it. So we get this one guy who said he really likes the church. He lives locally. He really likes Nevada City. He wants to minister there. And man, he would love to have the job. I said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just start doing it? Why don't you just start going to Nevada City and hanging out at the church and see what God does, right? Well, I've told all the candidates that, and of course they're not going to because they're applying for a job, and yet it seems to me that the best way to get someone in ministry is let it happen organically and naturally, and as they begin to get involved with a body of believers, see how God works, see how they work out, see what happens naturally. And the trick is you have to come in and commit yourself without getting anything in return. You're not guaranteed a darn thing. Not guaranteed a salary, you're not guaranteed the position. And the question is, can you be committed to a body of believers without getting any big stuff in return, like titles and salaries and authority and all that stuff? So, but that's not really the way it works. But anyway, it made me think of this. This is almost goes contrary, if you remember what we just read, to the way it works now, because he's saying, by the way, why do you think he starts out this way? Are we beginning to praise ourselves again? We know what he's going to launch into. Why does he start with that? Is he being sarcastic? Is it an honest question? Is it rhetorical? What do you think? I think you don't know, because I don't either. There's no commentary. but Mike might know. Mike, God
Yeah.
given you any insight on this?
Hang on a second. Rachel wants to come in. Okay, great.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
My insight is that he's again talking to these Corinthians, and these Corinthians are a bunch of how nicely can I put it? they fell up. They're a mess. And
So why is he saying this? Uh-oh.
Well, we get some feedback somewhere.
Get some feedback, yeah. Is when he says we, is he talking about the whole church, or is he talking about him and the other apostles?
I think he's talking about the other apostles with him. Probably
Yeah.
Barnabas. I don't know if Barnabas was there with him or not. But,
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
That's probably the case. So why is he saying this? Is he being sarcastic, or is he trying to make a point of some sort with these folks and this is a struggling church? You're right. One of the more struggling churches. Somebody's got their mic on and they're shuffling.
Oh, it's not.
Oh, it's probably Rachel.
Oh, no, I got to turn. I'm in my car right now driving.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
get
I
in a
don't
wreck.
need to just I don't mean to be distractive.
No problem.
Hey,
No
we don't
problem.
want you
There you
getting
go.
distracted.
There you go. Yeah, it's, if you're driving, it's probably best to have your mute, and which you've just done. Anyway, we're glad to have you with us, Rachel. Haven't seen you in a while. Wish we could see you. All right. Anyway, go ahead, Carl. Well, and I think what Paul's always having to, especially with these Corinthians, having to remind them of of who he is. He's the one that brought them the truth, and then these false teachers come in, and he has to kind of remind them of who he is and who they are.
Okay,
And
so
I don't think he's at all arrogant in trying to do this. He's just trying to keep them on the right track.
okay, so what do you think is his rhetorical answer to this question? He's obviously saying it with the assumption that you understand he's saying yes or no. Are we beginning to praise ourselves again? How are they supposed to answer that in their mind as they read this, do you think?
Well, if they should answer and say, no, you're not.
No, that's right. It's his way of saying, hey, are we trying to beginning to praise ourselves again? No, we're not. Okay, that kind of seems what he's saying. Is that what you think? Anybody else? Makes sense, huh? Okay, well, we'll go on. Are we like others who need to bring you letters of recommendation, or who ask you to write such letters on their behalf? Sounds like a job interview to me. Surely not. No way. It's not how we have to operate here. There are others that do that, and it's very, very commonplace today in in official ministry positions. Like I said, it probably is true the way big churches work. You have to have a lot of organization and really check into people's backgrounds and stuff, and they got to go to the right schools, and they need all kinds of paperwork. But he says the only letter of recommendation we need is you yourselves. That's pretty cool for him to say that to them. You are our letter. Your lives are a letter written on our hearts. Everyone can read it and recognize our good work among you. Okay, they'd been working among them, and of course he's not saying we did it all, hooray for us. He's talking about the good work that we were able to be a part of with God among you. What do you think so far? Kind of interesting stuff. But I always think this is kind of funny that the great apostle Paul didn't need, and he could have gotten letters of recommendation from being a Pharisee and all kinds. It wouldn't appeal to the Christian church, but he's a guy who had plenty of plenty of letters and accommodations and that kind of stuff.
His Pharisaism probably created a lot of problems for him, because people, we know that from the way people treated him sometimes, because they were afraid of him.
Yeah, you mean after he joined the church?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a problem. In fact, they were suspicious of him. The guy that used to kill Christians, he's joining us. Watch out for him. It's a trick. I mean, it took him a long time to get over that hurdle.
Is he making fun of the religion? Is the Pharisees?
Oh, here?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's making fun, but he's obviously going against the typical standard, and we do it today. And when the Beam Center hires somebody, they look into their background, as they should. It's a business. It's just our tendency is to do that. But he's saying that's not the way we need to work here. And it's just a really interesting, really a beautiful picture. Your lives are a letter written on our hearts. See, this is very personal with them. This isn't just we showed up, preached a few sermons, and collected some money and went. There's a lot of interaction with the folks, and they knew them. They talked with them. They loved them. They helped them through problems. And boy, their lives are written on these guys' hearts. They're not just showing up and doing a job. They gave their all. They were intimately involved with the folks. Your lives are a letter written on our hearts. Everyone can read it and recognize our good work among you. Clearly, anybody could see you are a letter from Christ. See, you're a letter written on our hearts, and the letter really is through you guys from Jesus, showing the result of our ministry among you. There was results. Now, wasn't perfect results, for sure. He had to write some pretty tough things to them because they were messing up a lot. But still, even in 1 Corinthians, there's so many good things that are related there about the things that were going on and accomplishments and changed lives. Mike and I have had a few discussions the last year and several years about where do we spend our time and effort? Do we even want to bother? I mean, we vote, but do we want to bother getting involved in politics? It's not wrong if people do, by the way. It's okay if you feel like you're supposed to do that and you're going to go represent Christ in political things. But we've kind of come to the conclusion, you go get involved in politics and it goes back and forth like a never-ending football game. But to change, to see lives change. Mike and I have both seen people's lives change, like Bobby. You know, she's changed a lot. She didn't think she has, but she has. And she's not going back. Now, she slips back a little bit, all of us do, but there's some real progress in spiritual things. It lasts. It makes a difference. People change. Politics, you know, you get a few minor things accomplished, and then the next administration undoes them all, and then you go back and send out more emails, and oh my, I think Mike and I have both learned, and probably most of you have learned, go put your effort and your time in people's lives. And even if you only change a couple, and you don't really change them, but if you're only involved in changing a couple of lives, those can spread out in ways you'll never see. They may go talk to their kids or influence somebody or talk to a friend, and it spreads out, and it's quite a network. Then you don't get to see it all. We don't need to see it all, do we?
I don't
We
know
don't really.
why, but this verse
Yeah.
kind of I thought of the scripture in the Bible when they were talking about writing it in stone, and like when we try to evangelize and we use like the Bible instead of like using our who we are, like I don't know. I just thought of this when when people say the letter is written not with pen and ink, and it also it says it is not carved on tablets of stone. I just thought of scripture.
Yeah, I think you made a good distinction, because even the Bible, if you take it as something, well, you can take it any way you want, but if you begin to take it as carved in stone, this is the absolute truth in an objective way, instead of the personal testimonies that they are. Really, the New Testament is really testimonials. That's why we call them the New and Old Testament.
Yeah.
We don't even call them the New Old Covenant or the New and Old Law or the New and Old writings. We call them testimonies, and they really are. Because when you read it, they're very personal. The letters are personal. They're about people's lives. They're just reporting this personal interactions going on, and not really, Paul doesn't push it as a systematic theology. You better read this and know all the information here and memorize these things in order or anything like that, like you get in school. Man, he's saying just the opposite. This is something very real and very personal. And it's about you that you are a letter from Christ showing the result of our ministry among you, imperfect as it is.
Religion, uses the Bible often as a hammer.
It sure does.
And,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
If we keep
yeah.
reading a few more verses down, it'll refer to it again.
Yeah, we'll get there real quick.
Yeah.
This hammer thing, Mike, it does get used as something to hammer people and instead of to encourage them sometimes. And and here's what happens. People get hammered by other people, and what are they going to turn around and do? Oh, this is the hammer for hammering people and proving my point. And we turn right around and do what we've been taught, whatever you've been taught. And this is typical of everyone, no matter how you're raised or if you came to Christ later in life. I've got a lot of friends who came to Christ in one way, and today they go, boy, that I believed it because those were my spiritual guides at the time, but they've had time to get perspective and they've kind of moved away from that or into something else. So what we see is what we turn around and do, but what we really want is this kind of stuff. This letter is written not with pen and ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. That's right. It's written in your heart. You are a testimony, and you're always better off, I would say, going to somebody and talking with them and being real with them, getting involved with their life, loving them, than you are quoting them verses and arguing proof texts. And that's just, people go like this and they feel vindicated when they walk away, but not a lot of progress is made sometimes. So that, Rhonda, great point. This contrast that Paul's making between the pen and ink, and he goes on and says, but with the Spirit of living God, it is carved not on tables of stone, but on human hearts. Of course, he's referring to what, 10 Commandments, all kinds of things from the past, where they'd carve it into stone, and there it is, the law. You better believe it. And yet, what gets carved in your life, in your heart, and in your soul by the Holy Spirit, that is, remember last week or 2 weeks ago, that fragrant aroma? To the aroma of our lives will be a beautiful scent to some people and a stench to others. So, great contrast, huh? Anything else on that before we go on to 4? We are confident of all this because of our great trust in God through Christ. We trust God through Jesus. Sometimes I feel like I trust God, period. And it's my knowledge of Christ and I believe in him, but sometimes I think, the bottom line is I trust God because he's there and who he is, and he's the creator of the world. And yes, this whole message about Jesus is certainly the best explanation I can come up with. Mike McGovern and I had a chat today about these kinds of things at the coffee shop. It was really interesting. But he's talking about our trust is in God, and that trust in God, the creator of the universe, who created us, and by the way, created them through Christ, that trust is through Christ. He's our gateway to God. Both
does anyone else have another translation open right there?
Do you?
I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead.
What verse again?
Yeah,
verse 4.
Verse 4. Yeah.
Verse 4
Of chapter 3, correct?
Yes, correct.
Such confidence we have through Christ before God, not that we are confident in ourselves to claim anything.
Okay.
Wait, not that we are confident in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our confidence comes from God.
There you go.
Okay.
Reading
I have
together is good.
Well, I have a problem with this translation here,
Okay.
because it says that Paul says, because of our great trust. And this is the thing, Carl and I have chatted about many times. I say that everybody has the same amount of faith. Mine is not greater than yours. Yours is not greater than mine or anybody else's. And I don't think Paul would even say that his trust was great. I think Paul would agree that his trust is in a great God, and his perception of God was such that it was great. But his trust, I mean, how can we say, well, I trust more than you? You know, how my trust is great, your trust is small. And so I just wanted to bring that out. I have a problem when the translations make that kind of a distinction.
Yeah. Anybody?
When it's not there in the original.
Yeah. Well, I'll look it up and see if it is, but
Okay.
it's a good theory, Mike. No, it's a good theory, and it could be. And I think in some ways we all have the same faith, at least in its object of Christ, that we believe in him. But I think some people experience a greater commitment and what they would call faith. It's just what you tend to see in people. And I think there are a number of places in the New Testament that would indicate that there you can have more or less faith. It appears to me, but you know, I think you made a good point. What do the rest of you think?
I think he meant that the trust itself was great, like the ability to trust.
Uh-huh.
So like it's a fantastic like responsibility or whatever, or gift. Like it's a great gift.
Yeah, the ability to trust is great.
Yeah.
The act of trusting is great. Not so much that some people trust more than others.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, that's a good, probably a number of these things. Again, we don't get a commentary with this except through Mike and me and other people who like to blab a lot.
But it would if you read the next sentence,
Uh-huh.
if you thought that was like a comparison thing, like some people have more or less, then that does not go with the next sentence, which says it is not that we think we are qualified. So he's saying it's not our, we don't have anything to boast.
Yeah, there you go. So that's a good point. So 5, it's not that okay, let's start at 4 again. We are confident of all this because of our great trust, or the trust that is a great thing that we all have equally or whatever in God through Christ. It's not that we think we are qualified to do anything on our own. That's the really important part. They are qualified to do things, but it's not on their own. Our qualification comes from God. So what we do, what these guys do, and really what we do is the job God's given us to do. We don't just step up and go, hey, I'm in charge here. I'm gonna decide everything. We're here to serve. We're here to love people. And so that qualification to minister to people, remember, ministry means service. It means to serve. And we think of ministers as the high honchos. A good minister is a servant. They lead by serving. And that is tricky. That's a tricky thing to do. But their qualification is not on their own. It comes from God. He has enabled us to be ministers, servants of his new covenant. Okay, and now he's going to launch into something really, really interesting. This is a covenant not of written laws. Okay, why is he saying that? Because there are written laws. And he's going, this new one, this new one is not like the old one. You could probably make 2 really long lists comparing all the things about the new covenant and the old. One's written on our heart, one's written on paper or stone or whatever. One's law-based, one's grace-based. He'll get into all this. This covenant is not of written laws, but of the Spirit. This new covenant is not of written laws, but of the Spirit. big contrast, the law and the spirit. The old written covenant ends in death. But under the new covenant, the spirit gives life. Man, what a bunch of contrast here. I mean, you can read these, go back and read them this week and think about these contrasts and how that works in your life and how it should work in the church and in relationships and in the gospel and everything. That's what the whole New Testament is about, is contrasting the old with the new, the law with grace. The old man, yeah. Mhm.
I think Paul shocked himself. I mean, he went 180 totally.
Oh, you mean what he went through?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
I mean, just if you think about the way he writes, it is total 180 from, you know, his Jewish law, and he went from analog to digital.
yeah, I think he never got over the Damascus Road experience, and he shouldn't have. That's what made him the really heartfelt,
Yeah.
humble man that he was going through. God took the very top guy, the most vicious, and turned him around and made him a puppy dog. But I don't mean a toothless poodle, but he knew how to handle himself, but it was always in love and grace. And he knew the difference. Boy, did he know the difference.
But I mean, that's where his true strength was. He didn't have to go boast about it at all.
No, he didn't.
You know, which was the opposite. And it's just, he blows my mind today, you know, 40 years later. It's crazy.
It is indeed. Okay, so
Crazy
what
in a good way. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I just said crazy in a good way. It's great.
Crazy in a good way. No, good point. I think you're right. He surprised himself. He was shocked. He probably kept pinching himself and going, what happened to me? This is wonderful. It's great. It's terrific. But man, he never dreamed that he would be hanging around with the people he was killing. That is such an amazing story.
And when we see this today, like the old written covenant ends in death, why, as you know, when we were back in the church world and religion world, why couldn't we see this? And that the law ends in death, and yet we gave so much credence to the law and tried to keep it and do all that kind of stuff. And I just sometimes I look at myself and my life in that, and I say, wow, how dumb were you, you know? And yet I believe that other people told me about it, but you know, I'm certainly smart enough to look at it myself and say, wait a minute, but why didn't I do that?
We had scales on our eyes, just like Paul did.
I agree with you. Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's in the Bible, but I remember hearing that Paul took many years before he actually started preaching and things. He was there a period of time after his conversion where he, a period of learning. I'm remembering 10 years or something.
Yeah. He went into the desert, and he said, he went into Arabia, went in the desert and I believe that he was saying that he was taught personally by the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I don't think it was simply like we have to learn from the Holy Spirit. That may have been the case, but I really think that he was taught personally by Jesus.
So
Somebody had to be taught grace, because the disciples still, where they were, still did not understand the gospel of grace. And even though they had that Pentecost, the filling of the Holy Spirit, they still had a lot to learn. And Paul was the one that had to teach them. And but I believe that the Bible indicates that Jesus himself taught Paul, and probably 10 years, 6 to 10 years, whatever it was. And when you get direct teaching from Jesus with grace, you got to remember when Jesus was on earth, he was still under the law. And some of his teaching, quite a bit of his teaching, was actually going along with the law. And so I don't think all of Jesus' teaching was all grace. A lot of it, I think, was still for example, he told the Pharisees, he said, you pay your tithes of mint, anise, and cumin. And he said, and you should, okay? But nowhere in the New Testament is tithing taught. So, that was part of the law that he was teaching, but that's because he was under the law. And as they were all under the law, he obeyed it.
There you go.
Mm.
Okay, Mike, just so you know, you got lucky, because I know you didn't look this up. But in once in a while you get lucky. It literally in the Greek says, such confidence we have through the Christ toward God. That's all. There's no great in there. That was
Right.
added. That was
Yeah.
probably added, unless they're probably the translators, they may have had some reason for saying, in the context or in those times, that kind of wording would imply great or something. But often they tend to add things according to their theology. So often translators will impose their theology on the translation. They're not trying to be bad. They're just being human. That's why it's really smart to look at some other translations and really dig deep before you hang a whole theology on it.
Yeah.
So good call.
But
Good
yeah.
call. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks. But yeah, but faith is what is basic. I mean, the faith less and more and greater and all that is basically what's taught by religion. And because that way they can always put some kind of hierarchy in there.
Yeah. Well, I would say in my experience, and everybody can decide for themselves, when I compare the Carl today with the Carl years ago and many years ago, I seem to experience greater faith than I did then. It feels like I have more faith, or I experience more, I'm trusting God more than I used to. That's what I experienced, and that's what most people tell me they experience. So I know what you're saying is a principle, may very well be true, but I'd say at least on the experiential end, I don't compare myself to anybody else. I got more or less faith. I compare the new me with the old me. And I seem to be trusting God more emotionally and in my actions and everything than I did when I was young.
Well,
Something grew, Mike.
well, you did,
Okay,
did. But not only that, I believe it's our perception. It's our perception of God, because that's what grows. And I think the Bible backs me up on that. And that it's perception that everybody has. And if you study and you seek to know more about God, and then the Holy Spirit reveals him to you to a greater degree as we keep going. And I believe all eternity is going to be a further revelation of who and what God is.
Yeah.
And therefore of who and what we are. But the thing that I know about me is that, yes, I am able to trust more. Not that my trust is greater, but my God is immensely greater than he was 45 years ago. And
Okay.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
If you can trust more without your trust being greater, that's terrific. I don't know how you do that, but that's okay. If that's how it feels to you.
When I say trust more, I'm able to put more and more and more things into God's hands and leave and drop them out of mine, and I drop them on him.
Okay.
And that's because I know that he is so much greater today in my mind than he was many years ago.
Fair enough. Keep in mind though, a lot of people would say that means they feel like they have greater faith.
Well, I understand what they feel like, but I'm just Yeah, but
It could,
that's,
it could
that's
just
the
be
point.
their experience,
Yep.
how they experience it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. That's good. That's a good discussion. Okay, let's go on. The glory of the new covenant. Now he hasn't even started this thing. He kind of did an introduction there in the past. And how much time we got left? A little bit. So we'll
Yeah,
start this.
15, 20 minutes. Hi, Rachel.
Yeah. Rachel, you made it home. You're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you. If you want to talk, you have to unmute yourself. Okay, so let's go on to this this next section. The glory of the new covenant is the way it's titled in my translation. Those are not in the original, but they're kind of titles that people put in. So that's a pretty good description of what's going on. The glory of the new covenant. The old way, verse 7, with laws etched in stone, led to death. Though it began with such glory that the people of Israel could not bear to look at Moses' face. So you remember that situation in the Old Testament when they couldn't even look at Moses? What was going on? Anybody remember that story?
Was his face too bright?
Yeah, it was the old bright Moses face. Yeah, it was glowing apparently. I don't know how that works in, physically, what the physics is of it, but he came down off the mountain receiving the 10 Commandments, and he was glowing in some way. So they couldn't bear to look at his face. Now, you wonder if it's something like they felt guilty what they were doing, and when he came down with the law, they couldn't bear to look at him. But it seems like there was more to it than just a guilt trip. There was something physical going on.
Well,
For
I
his
think,
face, yeah.
I think the Bible indicates that when Moses went up on the mountain to receive the law, he was put into a cave, and the Lord passed by, and it was only I think the Bible calls it in one translation, the hinder parts, or just the glow, just the back glow of God passed by and reflected off the walls of that cave. And this was not the brightest of God, because the brightest of God is going to destroy any human that sees. And but so this is just a little bit of the part of God that passed by that Moses was permitted to see, and it nearly blinded him, but it almost blinded the people who saw the reflection that was still on him. And this is what we have to look forward to, not in these bodies, because these bodies can't handle it, but that's what we have to look forward to in this next life, in the life after this life. And that's part of the glorious aspect of.
Maybe that's why Paul had to have scales on his eyes to protect.
He did.
Perhaps.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
And by the way, you may have be conflicting some stories there. That may be a different story about him hide in the cleft of the rock. There's a song. I don't know that that's the when he went and got the law, but it's a true story though, or it's a biblical story.
Well,
Anybody know where that's?
I only know of the two times that's really indicated that anybody saw. And Moses did not see him directly. I can guarantee you that.
Right.
And neither did Paul, because it was only a momentary split of the veil between this life and the next.
Yep.
That and it was so strong, the light was so bright that it burnt his eyes.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Or God put some scales on it to protect him. We don't know.
Whatever. I know.
Whatever. We don't know. We don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Good point. So anyway, they couldn't bear to look at his face, for his face shone with the glory of God. Whatever that is, some physical manifestation or whatever, even though the brightness was already fading away. So by the time he walked down the mountain, apparently it wears off. So I don't know if he had an encounter with phosphorus in the cave, or I, I would imagine it was something more miraculous than that. But anyway, that's what got reported. Shouldn't we expect far greater glory under the new way now that the Holy Spirit is giving life? Wow. So you got all this Old Testament glory, even under the law, is problematic as it was. It had a gloriousness about it because God was involved in it in some way and for some reasons. And that Mike and I have debated that one. But now under this new way, or the new covenant, or the new spiritual life, the Holy Spirit has given us life, and shouldn't we expect a greater glory under that? Does that make sense? Should you? Should you expect a greater glory with the Holy Spirit bringing the new covenant than Moses bringing the old covenant? I guess you better, because that's what he's trying to say. If you're reading between the lines, that's what Paul wants you to believe. Shouldn't we expect it? The answer is yes, you should expect that. Now he goes on, if the old way, which brings condemnation, did it, Mike?
Yes.
The old way bring condemnation?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure you were listening. If that was glorious, okay, in its own purpose, in its own way, don't forget it tutored us to Christ. That's pretty glorious, that alone. There are glorious aspects of the old covenant and even the law. Even Paul later in Romans says that the law is holy and righteous and good. Okay, there's something about the law that's good. Now it gets misused a lot. And it gets misused when we think when we keep the law, we're going to be made right with God. That's not true. But there is something about the law and what God's involved in that's always glorious, because he has some good purpose in it. So if the old way, which brings condemnation, was glorious, how much more glorious is the new way, which makes us right with God? One condemned us. The other one makes us right with God through the Spirit and through the new covenant through the blood of Christ. In fact, verse 10, that first glory was not glorious at all compared with the overwhelming glory of the new way. Okay, now we're getting down to it. You get right down to it, there's no comparison. It was just a little bit glorious, enough to make Moses' face shine. But when you talk about this new covenant, this new stuff we get through the Spirit that Christ sent, and he indwells us, and we have love for each other, and you can love like you never could have before. There wasn't a whole lot of love in the world before Jesus. It was a lot of turmoil. Boy, how much more glorious is the new way, which makes us right with God. In fact, I should then. So if
Yeah, but
I want you.
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
I want you to really, at least I would like for us to really see that it says it was not glorious at all compared to the overwhelming glory of the new way. And,
yeah.
And
Right,
again,
that's right. Oh,
yeah.
You cannot overstate that.
No.
It doesn't say it wasn't glorious at all, period. Okay, compared. There was a glory. Clearly, he's saying anything God's involved in has a glory to it and a purpose and something good in it. But compared, that was just preparatory work. The Old Testament and the law and everything was set up apparently to contrast to the new. So when we get the new, we go, wow. Otherwise, if God just came along, gave us the new covenant, we go, well, what's the big deal? So there is something about contrast and comparison for human beings, whereby, we really see the difference. It's like people who've been married to somebody else and it wasn't the right person, and they get remarried to the right person. What a contrast, huh? That happens to people.
That's me.
There you go. So nothing like contrast. And how much more do they appreciate their new marriage after the really, really tough one before. Or you could think of 100 analogies. So you kind of wonder why did God do all this stuff on earth and trouble and difficulty and everything? You go, isn't there a better way? Apparently there wasn't. If there was, he'd do it. Apparently this is how we learn. This is how we grow. This is how we discover and understand maximum, is through contrast and comparison. In our own lives, look at your own life, what you've been through and what God brings in your life that's new, and you go, wow, what a difference. Not just Paul, we all have our Paul experience of some sort. And then you've got the history of Israel and the history of Christianity and everything, and what and God didn't even run a quick experiment. He didn't have Israel come around for a year or two. I mean, that old covenant went on for many generations, for 2,000 years, from the time of Abraham till the time of Christ. That's a lot of generations, a lot of people living and dying and going through things and struggling and recording all that, so that when the new covenant comes, what an amazing contrast between law and grace. You just can't, you can't overstate it. This is really amazing stuff. So if the old way, which had been replaced, was glorious, how much more glorious is the new one, which remains forever? The other one was temporary. Look at all the contrast. Law, grace, temporary, permanent, bunch of stuff.
But again here, how is it that we didn't see for years that the old way was replaced? It was replaced at the cross, and yet we still bring it down to today.
Yeah.
And religion still brings the law, and they try to combine law and grace, and it's an abomination.
There are people who combine it more than other people, but it's not that all Christians, it's not even that most Christians don't understand that there's a difference between old and new covenant. I mean, that's a clear contrast that every Christian understands. To what degree they understand it might be different, and perhaps this group understands it better than others. I'm sure we think we do, but it's not that folks are void of that contrast. My other Christian friends very much understand the huge contrast between the old and new covenant. Maybe not all the ramifications of it, but like you've said, Mike, we're going to be learning that forever. Okay, but what a wonderful contrast. So 12. Oh, let's see. We still got a lot to go. Let's maybe stop there. You got any just thoughts on what we've covered so far? Because it gets even better and richer as we'll go on next week. Anything you're thinking of? Donna, you got to be thinking something. Where'd Donna go? Huh?
I was thinking about what I learned lately about the covenant. And in the old covenant, God made a covenant with Abraham, and instead of actually using, let's see if I can remember what it was. So something about with Jesus, that Jesus' body, they cut the body in half when they make the covenant. Are you guys remembering any of this stuff?
You're conflicting stories too, but
Yeah,
when
so there's two comparisons. You compare the old covenant and the way that God made it with Abraham.
Okay, yeah, when Abraham, when he made the covenant with God had the animals cut apart and separated. He walked right down through the middle of them, showing the separation. Now, again, we don't get a commentary from God on this. You get other verses and you get people speculating about what that means, but and that could be one of the meanings is this separation between old and new. The other meaning people claim is that if you break this covenant, this is what's going to happen to you. This is serious stuff, and it may have come out of the pagan. See, often God used pagan things to teach believers because that's what they understood. So he would redefine what they mean. Even like when God took Abraham and Isaac up on the hill, and he was having him walk through a very pagan thing to do, to go sacrifice your kid. Well, God, it was an object lesson to say, okay, this is the way you're oriented. So I'm going to take you all the way up there. You're going to lift the knife, and I'm going to stop you at the last second and say, no, this isn't what I do. That was the lesson. But it's kind of strange, because you go, well, was God kind of approving this? No, that's the whole point. He wasn't approving it. So these ritual things often came out of their own background. And even Mike and I've talked about this a lot. To what degree did he grab the law out of the heart of man and say, look, you're law bent. You want a law. You want to keep the law. You want to prove that you're something before me. That's fine. Let's run this experiment. Let's have law. I'll give you law. You want law? I'll give you law. And it'll be impossible for you to keep. And the result will be you will learn and be tutored to Christ. And now you'll appreciate grace, because you're never going to get right with me by keeping the law. So God sometimes uses very pagan things and very things that we come up with and we're used to teach us. And that might have been part of that, what was going on with that.
Well, and the contrast enables us to see how great God is, and to see how limited we are in our thinking, that we need God to teach us, and we need to see that the law does not create love. It does the opposite. It makes us judgmental, and God says, I'm not into that. He says,
right.
I'm love, and I want you to love and be loved. Know that you're loved, and so that's what the cross was all about.
Well, and you're right. You said earlier, why don't we get it? And in many ways, we don't. We keep trying to do law and works, and even though we say we're not, oh, we love grace and everything, and yet when you look at what people are doing and then what they focus on, it's all about, it's still kind of appeasing the gods is in us. And we keep thinking we got to do that. I got to read my Bible more. I got to witness more. I got to do all these things. I got to go to church. If I don't go to church, I'm not, you don't have to do a darn thing. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to go if you want. Probably a good thing to do, but you don't have to. It's not required. So we miss out on that freedom by keep trying to, we don't fully get, and I'm sure nobody here fully gets grace. I don't think any of us do. We just know more than we did before. That's all you can say. I don't even know if I know more than somebody else. I just know Carl knows more about it today than he did 10 years ago. And that's a wonderful thing.
We probably know about a thimbleful compared to the ocean.
Yep. But I guess that's all we need right now.
That's it. And eternity is going to be a continual revelation of all of that. That's why it's going to be so exciting forever.
Yeah.
We're never going to get to the end of the revelation of God. He's that big. And I'm excited to go. So,
hey, Paulo, what do you think? You're thinking something. I can see it in your eyes.
Well, I agree completely. We really just dipped our foot in the ocean, and it's really that I know much more, and I rest, and I feel the peace of God much more today than a month ago.
Yep.
And all the struggle, that we go daily, and that shows really why we still need to trust more in the practical things that God is dealing in our lives, and that so it's something continuous, and it never ends.
Yep.
But it's always empowering us, it's always teaching us, it's always transforming us. So it's wonderful, and I think it's a way to live. There's no other way than really, depending on God's grace. And
Yep.
from that point, it's not the old perspective of God, but it's the true and the right way, to see God from, not from we have to do anything, but we just have to see what God has done for us, what we are in Him, what He's done. It's all, and it's everything Him and us, and never us trying to achieve anything that we can do it by ourselves. But that's really the religious, and even our own nature, our own ego, our own flesh always wants to prove something, always wants to achieve something, and
Yep.
that's always our default. Or so I can, when I'm 80 like Mike, I'm still learning. I've still got things to work out.
Yeah, the flesh rears its ugly head occasionally, and we have little setbacks, even just in our mind and our discouragement and stuff. But you go down this road long enough, and I go, I'm not going there. And yeah, I'll even kind of feel that way for an afternoon or a day or overnight or something, and then I just wait. I don't try too hard to fight it. I just don't give into it either. And the Spirit will eventually get you past it, and you move on, and you learn the lesson once again that He's faithful. And it's a wonderful walk, but it's a little bumpy at times.
Yeah, let me tell you how bumpy it was for Carl this past weekend. He tried to steal a telephone, and the sheriff showed up. He got caught there, and then he tried to set the place on fire. And I don't know if he got.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
I unplugged. Wait. I unplugged we'll go to this motel, and I unplugged the telephone because I hate it when somebody calls in the middle of the night. So I've always done that. Well, it turned out this motel, when you unplug the phone, it automatically dials 911. So the manager comes out and says, "You called 911?" I said, "No." So I said, "Nothing." So he leaves. About 10 minutes later, the sheriff comes to the door. He says, "Did you call 911?" I said, "No." He wanted to come in and see if everything was okay, make sure I didn't have my wife tied up or something. And so then we go to bed, and I get up and I want a piece of toast. So I brought my toaster with me. Plugged it in. I guess you're not supposed to do that. Plugged it in, and the smoke alarm went off. So then the fire department came out. No, just kidding. But the alarm went off about 11:30 at night. Beep, beep, beep. I'm waving the air, and finally took the toaster and put it in the bathroom. So the next day, Janice says, "You really want to stay another night?" I don't know. But anyway, it was fun to get away.
Okay, anybody else got anything to say before we close?
Can you beat that? When you coming back from DC?
19th or something.
You're muted. Another week? Okay, I see the lips are moving.
Let me hear Greg say something. Come on, Greg. What date?
17th, about 10 more days.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Counting every day now.
Good. Boy, that's a long time to be there.
I miss my Gophers.
I didn't want to bring it up, but
There are plenty of Gophers in DC.
That's rats.
Different kind, a lot of rats too. Yeah, well,
I guess so. All right. Love all you guys. Appreciate y'all being here. And so we will see y'all next week, if not before. And take care.
read
Bye.
chapter 3 a couple of times.
And next time I'll try not to mess this up. Good night.
You got it done in time. Bye.
Good night, everybody. It's good to see you all.
Glad you joined us.
Bye.